To me, being in that room when Jim gives those famous speeches that we know now watch in '97 or whatever, of digging that deep, is it that intense and scary, motivating, listening to him speak?
Yeah. Do you know what? Well, the nerves and that, and most of those were before test matches. And can I add, Ian McGeechan was just as inspirational, but there's something about Jim Telfer's voice, his character, that just absolutely inspires. You know, even in training sessions, he would do things like kickoffs were too slow. And we said, we're sprinting flat, but he would make ways where we start back an extra 5 meters and and you'd get there, and he'd always manage to get, you think you're 100%, you're only doing about 90. He'll get you at least to 95. And it was always that way. And it was a mental hardness, just don't feel sorry for yourself attitude. In Scotland, I guess when you had Jim every session, some of the forwards weren't the biggest fans of coming in time and time again to this. But in a one-off occasion, whether it be Johnson, Delalio, especially the forwards, I think, Woody, myself, Hilly, Jeremy Davis, we were all absolutely enthralled for him to just push and push and push. But I think it was, as a team, it was like he was one of the players with us on the pitch. And of course, he had great leadership of Martin Johnson as well, who was a man of fewer words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Even a look from Jono could tell you would be more than, some players like to talk a lot, some captains, leaders. Jono's a man of few words, but I would say much more influential than the others.
Yeah. And that sliding doors moment when you didn't think you were going to make it to South Africa and you passed your opponent in Heathrow and end up playing 3 tests. Do you find that remarkable looking back?
Yeah, look, I was, again, you talk about disappointment. I felt I was playing very well in Saracens at the time. In Ireland, we played against Scotland in the last game of the Six Nations, lost that match, and we would have been expected to dominate up front. I was up against Tommy Smith, the late Tommy Smith, who became a great friend of mine and played in the Lions team with me. As I like to say it, I didn't lose my spot on the Lions tour. I got Tommy his spot on the Lions tour. But he's like a little tent peg. The more you pushed him, the more you'd like pushing him into the ground. So he wasn't the most aggressive guy to go at you, but to get dominance was very difficult. And then he was such a great player around the park. And yeah, that disappointment and not getting selected, I suppose, was again a benefit to me, because I came not thinking I'd have a chance, because you had Di Young who had played in the Australian Test Series 8 years before. Jason Leonard had played 4 years before at tighthead. So I was thinking I'd be lucky to get a few games, and it was just about give everything and just show that you should have been on the tour. But to break into the test team, I always felt I was good enough, but I didn't think I'd ever get the opportunity to actually make a good run at it. And of course, passing Claw, who didn't pass the show, was, we had a ding dong every time we played at each other. I was the young pretender coming through at Munster, and then it was Munster, Leinster, or Saracens, and that. So we had a good ding dong. It was very competitive. Like Claw was never quite like the young fella coming. He doesn't even arm around and try and bring you through. He's going, I'm fighting you tooth and nail for this spot. And God, we had some sparks around the pitch over the years.
Yeah, but you got in there and you met that lovely man, Os Durant.
Yeah, big Oz, yeah. And funnily enough, I got carried away with myself. I was going quite well in the midweek team. We were out scrummaging all the competition. And I was going, now I've got the big English, back 5 along with Jeremy Davidson. It was Rod Burr, Delalio, Hill, Johnson, Jeremy. That's a lot of weight in there, a lot of physical size. Not countenancing that the Springbok back 5 were even bigger. I was up against Saracens. Went too high, tried to power scrummage. 1 penalty against us, which I take the scrum height was my fault. Next one, another penalty. They're 3-0 up. I'm under the post. Mentioned Martin Johnson. He just gave me one look. It was this frown and the way, the look he can give you. Yeah. And I went, right, cop on. You've been too arrogant trying to power scrummage against this giant Oz. Oz means ox in Afrikaans, and to be called that in the high veld, to be nicknamed
It's
Oz
serious.
is just tells that they're huge men at the best of times. But yeah, and a wonderful guy. But from then on, once I scrummaged, scrummaging is about, it's a form of wrestling, and they're trying to take that out of the game, and it's about technique and getting a guy into a bad position and then exerting your power and strength, as opposed to just trying to do it the other way around. So that, and unfortunately, it's this skill and talent that's been taken out of the game, I think, in the Northern Hemisphere, mainly due to interpretation of the laws from the Southern Hemisphere, who never had that ability over the years. By doing that and just sticking what you're good at and not getting carried away with yourself, then we pretty much dominated the scrum from there on in, and we got all the scrum angles that we needed, including Matt Dawson's famous try in the first test, which was probably the game breaker. So it was, yeah. And back then, you played 80 minutes, and a big man, you could wear him down. There was a lot more scrums than there are these days. So if you just kept working and working and working at the big giant, you could eventually wear them down, as I was David to the Goliath, as it were. But yeah, it was great. A wonderful guy. And one thing I'd say about the Springboks, he used to always have a bit of a bad reputation because of the Afrikaners post-apartheid and that. But sportsmanship, they were always fantastic in changing a jersey or meeting after a game. And even though there was a huge rivalry, especially the following year when they toured with Ireland in '98, where there was the Battle of Pretoria and that, which was quite famous, they were always great guys. And I must say, and great sportsmen, and just very, very physical. And funnily enough, where we thought we were the opposite to the South Africans, I work with a lot of South Africans now, and we're actually very, very similar, I believe.
And there was no of those 99 call moments. It was all very friendly compared to the old days on the highway.
No, there was quite a few. Well, we had Andre Venter, who was probably the best athlete. Well, he's probably still one of the best athletes to have played the game. At number 6, he plays sevens. He was about 6'4", 5". He was really fast, but incredibly big and powerful. And all he wanted to do was fight all day. So we said it's better he's doing that than running over Jerry Guscott at the 13 Channel. So we kept him busy in the tight exchanges.
Yeah, and would you say that was one of your iconic moments, your good moments you look back on of the touring party, the good moments of the panel and the team? The high moments of your career?
It is, until coming back from my injury. Like, I always swore, I said this, I was in the back of the bus coming out of Kings Park with Jerry Guscott, and I turned to Jerry, who'd always also won a series in Australia. I said, "Jesus, is this better than Australia?" And he goes, "That they're all different occasions, you can't compare them." And I said, right, I was 25. I said, "This is not going to be the top of my career. I'm just far too early." And I remember saying to me, "This is just the start. It's going to be better. I'm going to move on to the next level." And, one of my biggest regrets is we lost the third test. We've done now a lot of guys had injuries and cried off, but that was certainly an opportunity. We certainly did a lot of partying as well up in Vanderbilt Park in the middle of nowhere for a few days. But yeah, we probably played our best rugby as well in that third test, but just things didn't come off, and then they'd go to length of the pitch and score. But we certainly played some great rugby, which we only did in fits and bursts in the first 2 tests.
Okay, and around Christmas table, of the 3 Wallace brothers who played for the Lions, who is the greatest, inverted commas, according to themselves, when you're meeting?
Well, I'm the only one that won a series, so I can David with his Grand Slams and Ricky with his Triple Crowns, they can
Mickey Mouse
take that, and yeah.
That's beats them all.
Yeah. No, look, David in particular had so much success with Ireland, and he's had 2 Lions tours and just been put on the Lions board as well, which is...
Yeah, I saw that this week, yeah.
Yeah, and he played in that series, which, like, one of the best games I've ever been to was in Lochtisversveld in Pretoria, that second test, which unfortunately we lost when Brian O'Driscoll and Adam Jones had that head injury. I think we could have won the series, and series they're so tight.